Welcome to the Think It, Make It podcast. We're all about turning your ideas into reality with a CNC router, tips and tricks, new products, interviews with the pros, and much, much more. Whether you're using a CNC for business or hobby, we have great stuff in store for you.
Let's get on with the show!
Everybody, welcome back to the Think It, Make It podcast. My name is Eric. This is episode number 22, and I am here this week with Bobby and Greg. And we got a pretty packed episode here. Last week, you heard about my project and how I designed it, and we did a accompanied video. This episode is going to be done exactly the same way, except today is Greg's turn to go over his project, how he's designed it, and using Vectric. So there'll be a video component to this as well. So this podcast will be available on the website and on YouTube, both in video format, in addition to in the audio. And again, we're going to do our best to try to not say things like push this and click here. We'll try to keep it as verbally explanatory as possible. However, Greg was upset, and when Greg's upset, I have to try to figure out what to do to make Greg happy. And he was upset because he didn't get to do a tech tip in the last issue, or in the last episode. So this time he wants to start off with a tech tip. So I think, if that's going to make him happy, we're going to start off with a tech tip.
My tech tip this week, I saw a lot of people just trying to load VCAR files into UCCNC. Which is not going to work. You're going to get a bunch of gibberish, a bunch of characters that's going to say error on line probably 52 or something like that, and it's because you're trying to load the wrong file type. Whenever you load a file into UCCNC, it has to be a pure G-code file, which is normally one of two things. It's either a TXT file or a .tap file. Most TAP files, you won't see our post-processors output that. As long as it's a TXT file, then that will work. But that's the file you want to load into UCCNC. That's the post-processed file from Vectric. It's not the CRV file. The CRV is your Vectric file.
And that same thing will hold true if you're a Mach 3 user or if you're a Centroid user. Any of those programs that are driving your CNC machine are going to require you to run the actual G-code file, not the Vectric or even the Fusion 360 file. So just always be sure that you're loading. Some programs, it's not TXT. Some programs, it's .nc.
NC works, yep.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different. And in fact, on UCCNC, I don't even really think it matters if it's .txt. I don't think it's looking specifically for .txt. It's just that's the output that our post processor creates. It's just looking for a text-based G-code file.
Correct. But if you are a Stepcraft user, that's generally what you're going to see is TXT. If you try to load your CRV file, which is your Vectric file, it's not going to work. That's not G-code. And people get real nervous. They get scared when we talk about post-processing and stuff like that. But honestly, all that really means is that we're taking what you've done in Vectric, we're putting it through a post that converts it to G-code for our machine or any machine to read, and it turns it into G-code for that. It's the click of a button. So don't get nervous when you hear post-processor, because it's literally just like saving it. It's one extra step.
Very cool. Now, more importantly, are you happy now that you got to get that out of the way?
Yes.
Excellent.
I feel better.
That's what we were shooting for. We want to make you happy, especially because this episode really is all about you and your project.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know my project, I started a little wishy-washy. Wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I'm glad that happened, because I ended up finding something that really is important to me, and that's going to be my parents' dog, Bella, passed away recently, and I'm doing a Lithophane memorial type thing, collar holder. I know you can't see the screen here, but basically what it's going to be is kind of like a box that you would hang on the wall, put up like a picture frame, whatever. It's going to have her name. It's going to have a Lithophane, a custom picture of her that you can see when you hold it up to the light. It's going to have a little cool saying there, and then a little spot for her collar. And then that's the basics of it. So my goal here, like I said in the last episode, was to make my mom cry, because then I know I did a good job. I know that's really weird to say, but then I know it really means something. And then this is something that I can turn into, sellable, because all you have to do is send me a picture. We can easily turn that. Lithophanes take 5-10 minutes to make. It's no big deal. Once we have that process down, there's that custom aspect to it without going too deep into it.
I've been in a good mood today, all pumped up, and then your project just makes me sad.
I just read the quote, and now I'm just out of tune.
I can't read the quote, thankfully, because my glasses aren't going to allow me to read that far away. But yeah, I'm
So we're three guys here. We're
all crying at the table.
I was balling up when I was making this too, but now I'm really excited about it. And what I basically have here is I have her name, Bella, at the top there. And then I have a little saying that says, "No longer by our sides, forever in our hearts. Look to the light to remember, we're never far apart." And the reason I put the look to the light there is because of the lithophane. That's the wow factor, the kind of cool thing I was going for. So when you hold that up to the light, looks like nothing, just kind of looks like a white piece of nothing, and then you see the actual picture there. And it has a wow factor to it.
That's catchy.
So yeah, it'll look like almost like a negative.
Exactly.
But it'll be all white. So your plan with this is what that lithophane part of this is going to be removable, or you have to take the whole thing off the wall?
So that is what I'm going to experiment a little bit with, because originally I had planned to have just this. There's a circle or an oval right in the middle here, kind of like you would see on a gravestone type thing, and I was gonna have that piece removable. But the more I get into this and the more I'm kind of breaking this up into layers, I'm wondering if I just use the soapstone or the coriander that I'm doing with the lithophane and use that as the back and put the saying into there so that it is one kind of piece. Because otherwise I would have to do the circular cutout. I'd have to put it in there, which I think is cool. But if I'm going to waste that material, why not just put the backdrop on there? So the way I have it set up right now is I have it in 3 different sheets. I have the first sheet is going to be the back, which is going to have the V-carve. We're going to V-carve the name, we're going to V-carve the saying, and we're going to cut out the hole for the lithophane and also the 2 rectangles for a collar, where you can put the collar through the back and hold it on there. That's going to be one sheet. The next sheet is going to be the lithophane, which I have here in a different sheet. And we can bring that up.
Double click it.
So that's going to be the what was this soapstone that we're using?
Candlestone.
Candlestone.
And corian.
Corian was another one I saw. But this we have here is candlestone. So that's going to be one. And originally what I was going to do was cut the circle out, cut the lithophane out so I have it around her face. So you basically just see a good picture there. And then pop that, kind of insert that in. But the more I was thinking about it, you know, how would I get that in there? Would I glue it in there? Would I kind of just seed it in there? And I'm wondering if it might be better just to use the candlestone to do the entire backdrop. So instead of doing this lithophane part, use the candlestone for the entire back.
So you're not intending to have a light in the back of this in order to experience the lithophane. You would have to physically take it out and hold it up to a light based on your saying. Is that your plan?
No, you wouldn't have to remove it. It would be fixed. Everything would be fixed in there, but you would hold the entire thing up.
Right, but that means you have to take it off the wall.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Another idea I was just thinking is if you stuck with the oval and you built a thing in the center that was like a larger oval and that was kind of like it added some depth basically. So you'd have your engraved part and then the candlestone oval would be say 3/4 of an inch in front of the background. That would give you a little space behind it to drop an LED with like a 9-volt battery or a AA battery. And then what you could do is you could have a button on there that you push to light it intermittently. If you're making something to hang on the wall, I just don't know how are people going to take it off the wall?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So then you lose the experience of the photo because it's going to look like a negative instead of an actual photo when it's on the wall. So if you had like from Amazon, you can get little tiny intermittent push buttons and you have just an LED behind it. So you're saying look to the light, and then you push the button, and that would light the back. And now you don't ever have to take it off the wall.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't like the idea of having a constant LED on there because I kind of want it to pop. Like you don't see anything, and all of a sudden you see it pop. So I
Right.
like the idea of the button.
Yeah, because otherwise it'd be like everything we have in our demo where all the batteries are dead.
Right.
Because people forget to shut them off. So
Right.
just intermittent. Somebody would just push it, and then that negative would turn into a black and white photo, a lithophane. And
So I also like the idea of maybe instead of hanging this on a wall, I'm glad you brought that up. Maybe we have this, or I have this sit as almost like a picture frame so that it sits on the windowsill. So when the light hits it, you kind of get that effect of it as well.
I mean, you could do that too. So on the back, behind the lithophane, you could put a piece of acrylic and route it into the back of it, so that you'd basically, if you were to look at this, you'd have an oval cut in your back plate with a dado in it, and then you'd have a piece of acrylic on the back, and then put an LED on the inside, and then have your lithophane in front of it. So if you didn't want to use the LED and you wanted to put it in front of a window,
Right, it would still work.
It would still work because the light would shine through the acrylic in the back. But if you did want to hang it on a wall, so now you're giving that customer the option of they could put it on. Maybe you even have a fold-out kickstand on the back, like a picture frame, so they can leave it on an end table, or they can go on a mantle, or you can hang it on a wall, or you could put it, get the suction cup hooks, and you can stick it right on a window. So you could do that too. Or have two versions of it. They can order it with an LED light or to be a window version.
Yeah, I love that.
Just another idea.
Absolutely.
I think the idea is awesome. Like the concept is really cool. And honestly, I still think you're going to probably sell more of these. This is a better selling idea, probably more so than Bobby and mine. But
More customizable.
more customizable. You're pulling at the heartstrings a little bit more. My son's dog is here every day. I can't even imagine, like, if anything were to happen to her, I'd be devastated. So, like, I totally get it. And I think it's a great idea. I'm just trying to think of, by adding an LED or by adding a piece of acrylic, you're turning this, what would normally be a static project, and you're turning it into something that has some life to it. And whenever you do that, it means the value is greater too. So you could probably sell it for a little bit more money, and you're really only talking about pennies for a battery, a little cheap, Amazon, you could probably buy 50 little push buttons for, $10 or something. And then a little LED light behind it. But you could, doing the acrylic would be relatively easy. And that would let you, hang it on a window. You could buy suction cup hooks for it to hang it, depending on how heavy this thing's going to be. So it opens up some ideas.
Okay.
And not only that, but if you went that way with the lithophane and the light and the windowsill idea, you could literally make a smaller version of this to just be a product that would hang in the window. Right? So it doesn't have to be the whole box. It could just be, you could do the lithophane and engrave the dog's name in the bottom of the lithophane. So you can just put a hole in the top with a suction cup so it can hang in the window.
That's a cool idea.
Like a sun catcher.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
they call those things. So there's a few different ways you can go about it. You could also make a lithophane in front of a night light in the hallway, so that when you walk down the hallway at night and it's a motion sensor light, it comes on, there's a picture of the dog. I don't know. I could build a whole business just out of this concept.
And lithophanes are easy. I mean, I was very surprised. I'm using Aspire here because V-Carve you would have to use. We kind of discussed this earlier. I think you would have to do photo V-Carve, which is now included with the V-Carve. It used to be a separate product, but now it is included with V-Carve, and I don't have too much experience with that. So the only way I knew how to do this was through Aspire. Right. Was to do the Lithophane. And Aspire is, as we've talked before, is a much more expensive product. But that's the only way I could, if I were to do this with V-Carve, I would have to learn a little bit of photo V-Carve more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to give you an idea of what this kind of looks like, and I know you can't see this. do our toolpaths here. And I was really stunned. I was just so happy with how this came out. The Lithophane function or the preview in Aspire V-Carve is absolutely stunning. I mean, to see what it kind of looks like. So you can see here the words are, I V-carved this, just a quick toolpath. I might go a little bit deeper there because you can't see the words at all here. But the Lithophane is just absolutely amazing. I mean, I
Yeah, that's cool.
fell in love with that feature. And it was so easy. I mean, it literally took probably, you can see, I have 4 or 5 different pictures here that I was experimenting with. And I could create a Lithophane in those for 2 minutes on each one. So that's something where I think the customization, when you offer something like that, I think you add a layer of complexity. But that's going to be super easy if you just want that.
Now, what was the point of building a box around it? Like, why couldn't you use like a nice piece of oak as the background on this, or maple, and then just use the router to put an edge around it, like a round over or an OG or something all the way around? So now it's just a flat wood plate with the focus then just being on the Lithophane and the dog collar, instead of going through the extra work of building a shadow box around it.
Yeah, it was more just kind of style. You know, there's no function to it. There's no reason for it. But when I look around, a lot of stuff that we have in our house, a lot of things that my girlfriend likes are kind of those set back pictures. And that's another thing too. I have on a sheet here, I have my 4 edges. Very similar to what you were doing last week, where we were going to 45 degree that, maybe put a rabbit dado in there, and kind of go from there. But we're starting to get a little bit more into it than I think I might like. So that's a good idea. I mean, I might just do this flat, but that was just a pure style choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of, time, not even cost, but it's time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing sides on mine because it's a cabinet. You're essentially making something decorative that you would hang on the wall or on a table. So it's not the decorative part, is really based on the Lithophane and your engraving. So I'm thinking you could eliminate that extra work for yourself with the box. Unless somebody wanted a shadow box concept, but this way you focus really on a nice plaque that's stained or painted, probably stained, I would think, if you're going to use nice wood. But then you don't have to worry about the edges. So you don't have to worry about covering up the edges if it's plywood, right? So because even your box pieces, you're going to have to use some sort of solid wood for that, so that you don't run into an end grain issue on the front face. So I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas because I think it's a cool concept. I'm just trying to think. Again, when I went through my project, I was talking about using the vacuum fixtures, and that was specifically for what if I get a lot of orders, right? So if you got a lot of orders, how do you make these projects over and over again? And my solution was the vacuum fixture, by putting the piece on. It does everything. Now, in your case, if you were to get a lot of orders, you have to make the Lithophane, you have to make the back plate. You're going to have to probably treat the back wood first,
Mm-hmm.
clear it, and then do your engraving if you wanted to color fill the engrave, because you need that clear on top to be able to sand off the paint. Depending on the wood you're using, you could use masking, but you'd still have to add some clear first so the masking would stick, and then you can backfill the paint. So you've got to do that already, and then you've got to do the Lithophane, and then potentially the acrylic piece if you do that in the back, or wiring. So you got a few steps there. Not hard, but if there was no like functional reason for it, that was my only suggestion.
Yeah, and it's purely a stylistic. I think maybe what I'll do with this first one is try that. I'll see how long it takes to get the sides on there, to do the dados, and because if it's worth it, I think I like that a little bit better. But if it takes 4 hours just to do that, then I mean that's not going to be worth it, and it's not going to add any function to it.
Right, but if you had like an Etsy store that you create specifically for pet memorials, then there's no reason why you couldn't have like 10 different versions of the same product.
Yeah,
and
somebody I think that's where matches. I'm heading. I think we're going down kind of that route, even though it seems really, really saturated, Etsy, with this whole concept. You can find anything on there.
With Lithophanes, though?
Well, not necessarily Lithophanes, but
so
with memorial type stuff.
So you're the thing you're doing that's different that's going to stand out is the Lithophane.
Mm-hmm.
And a good idea. Somebody gave you that. Who gave you that idea? The Lithophane.
I think it was Bobby.
Yeah, it was probably Bobby. That's it. Yeah. I think that would be cool. I think start now. The other issue I see, just throwing stuff out there, is you're going to have the dog collar on the bottom. So I'm guessing the collar goes through. That puts the buckle on the backside, which might prevent you from hanging this from a wall flat, because the buckle, depending on how thick the buckle is, it's going to push the bottom of that.
And that's where I need to decide what we're going to do on the backside, because I do need some room back there, either for the collar or for the lithophane to pop in there. Because what I was thinking, this is going to be 1/4 inch backing on there, and then it's going to be a 1/4 inch lithophane. So if I slide that in there, it could be kind of cool. There would be, like, if we look at the preview here, you can see there's almost like a depth to it.
Okay.
So the way I have it right now is just set up basically carving that 1/4 inch down there, and I kind of really like how that has a depth to it. If we look sideways, you can see it kind of goes down there.
The lithophane is
sunken in, whereas the other option is to put it completely and pop it in there, so it would be kind of standing out forward a little bit. Either way, I mean, doesn't really matter, but it just depends how I'm going to seat that in there and get that to stick in there.
Well, so how thick is that back panel?
The back panel right now, I have it set up for a 1/4 inch.
Okay. So what type of material do you intend to use that's a 1/4 inch thick?
A nice looking hardwood.
It's going to be very difficult to find a piece of hardwood at a 1/4 inch that you don't have to run through a planer to get it down.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, traditional wood. So there are companies that sell it, but it's going to be expensive because you're going to have to process it. So when you get lumber from a mill, if it's rough sawn, it's usually like an inch thick, give or take. If you go to like a Home Depot or Lowe's, it's going to be either 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch thick. So I've not really seen a lot of, there are project boards at Lowe's that were, I believe, a 1/4 inch, but they're only a couple inches wide. So you'd have to glue those together. The only reason I'm saying that is you're going to V-carve your letters for the name. And how tall are the text letters there?
That is a really good, I'm glad you brought that up, because
you're going to punch through the back.
Yep, we're going to punch through, and not all fonts are created equal in V-carve.
Yeah, just click on your text and then there you go. So what you're looking at? Oh, font. All right, it's okay. Just click on the text and at the bottom right there. So your letters are 1.5 inches high.
Yep.
So yeah, if you're depending on the V-bit you're using, right? So if you go with a 45 degree, it's going to go deeper. If you go with a 110 degree, it's going to be shallower. But you got to find the sweet spot there, because you don't want to go so shallow that it has no relief, and it's just scratching the surface, but you don't want to go so deep that you punch through.
And a lot of fonts that I really liked, that I thought looked stylistically good, did not work well with V-carve. They were not cutting. It was leaving all sorts of things out. The vectors were closed. So it's a game of finding the right font that works with the right bit.
Right. A lot of times, too, you can bring in a font. You may have to go in, convert it to curves, and then edit the nodes on the font, especially if it's like a script font. A lot of times on script fonts, if you look at the individual letters, they actually overlap one another when you look at it from a vector standpoint. And then you have to go in, convert it to curves, go in with the scissor tool and clip everything out so it connects together.
Which can be an absolute nightmare depending on the font.
It could be. Depending on the font. Yeah, it just depends on the look you want. But I would never choose a font specifically to make it CNCable. I would choose the font that I like, that presents the way I want, and then convert it to curves and make the vectors CNCable. I would never go the other way around, because, like Vectric only has, there's not a ton of fonts in there, your basic stuff that you see all the time. But if you go to like 1001fonts.com or something like that, there's a ton of free fonts, and you could find some really cool stuff. And I've done that, and I've downloaded them, and I brought them into my projects. But when I convert them to vectors, they need a little bit of work. So you have to go in and do that. But once you've done it once or twice, it's really not that difficult to go in and clip them and join them. So that's just something to consider is with a 1/4-inch backboard, your chances of your V carving punching through the backside is pretty high. Especially like see the B, the bottom part of the B closest to the E. See how wide that is compared to like the bottom and middle and top of the B. That V bit is going to go deeper there because the V carving will send that V bit into the material until both edges of the blade touch the vectors. So the wider your vectors are in your letters, the deeper it's going to go. And you have 3 ways of adjusting it. Choose a different font, but I'm not recommending that. You can go with a higher angle V-bit, so you can go to a 60 or 90 or 110. That'll prevent it from going as deep. Or you could set a flat depth on your V-carve, which will prevent the bit from going any deeper than what you set. So you could set a 1/8 inch flat depth on this, and it'll guarantee that you never go any deeper. But that may not give you the look you want either, because now the center of your letters will have a flat spot instead of being a true V carve. So it's just something to consider. I would consider going with 1/2 inch or even 3/4 inch material on this. And what that'll do is that'll give you the ability to do this back plate 2-sided. You could flip it over and create a rabbit or a dado on the back so that you could put a piece of acrylic in on the backside. Or if you decided you wanted the lithophane to have that sunken look, then you could pop the lithophane in from the backside.
Well, that was the whole idea, was to pop it in from the backside. But do I cut it exactly so that there's a little bit of material left so that it just sits there and then I can just plug that in right there? Or do I do a complete cutout and kind of somehow fit it in there?
Well, let's just say your oval is 4 inches wide, right? If you make the oval cutout in your back plate 3 3/4 inches wide, now you have a 1/8 inch lip all the way around. So if you did a dado from the backside, and
right, you could just kind of
sit it in there, and then you've got a 1/8 inch lip all the way around that kind of covers up the edge of the lithophane. So it's going to look really clean when you do it that way. The other option would be to create a block that has a shape to it with an oval cutout in it that sits on top of this plate. So now the lithophane is sitting proud of the surface of the.
That I think I don't like that. I want to avoid that.
That would be something you would need to do if you were going to go with the LED route, because you need to have a little bit of back area. So you need to have something in there, space for the LED and for the battery. So you would have to build that out a little bit. Even if you went with a 3/4 inch backboard, your lithophane material's 1/4 inch thick, a little over 1/4 inch thick. So that really only leaves you with a 1/2 inch left over, and you're just not going to have enough room to put a battery and stuff in there.
And that's why I started with the 1/4 inch backing material, because I know I had the 1/4 inch lithophane material, and I wanted it to kind of sit flush even so it all looked good. I'm afraid that if I do 3/4 inch backing material and put a 1/4 inch lithophane in there, it's going to look a little bit silly. It's not going to sit flush.
Well, the other issue with it sitting flush is I avoid it just because, in other words, if you cut the oval for the lithophane and then you cut an oval in the back plate and your intention was to take the lithophane and press it in to the oval you cut so it's nice and flush, you run into some issues because you're using 2 different materials. There are some tolerance issues you need to worry about. You need to worry about tool wear, deflection, things like that. So it could be possible that you'll find that either that oval lithophane won't push in no matter what you do, and then you don't want to have to beat it in with a hammer. You'll ruin it. Or you may find that it fits in loosely and then you've got a gap all the way around.
But if I do it that way, that would leave me space in the back for some LEDs to put in there. So maybe that's not a terrible idea if I can get those tolerances down.
Yeah. I mean, there's, like I said, there's several ways of doing this, that you can do it.
Now, my only other idea was to actually use the backing material of the soapstone here. Candlestone. Is to cut the lithophane into that, but also to use it as the backing material. And I just thought of that kind of briefly. I don't know if I'm going to love how that looks.
You're not going to be able to paint that. If you're using candlestone wax and everything, and the material is going to make it very difficult for paint to adhere. You might be better off doing a mask with and paint it. You paint the back material on this.
Okay, so I think that's what I'm going to. The only other option was the laser, and I don't like the look of the laser. I don't love that. It would be a heck of a lot easier, and I might try it kind of side by side with this just to see what it looks like. But for this one, I think I'm going to do a paint.
Yeah, I mean, you could V-carve it and then throw the laser in and laser into the V-carve to darken it up. That's another option. I know you'd mentioned possibly using epoxy too, which I think that would be a lot of work for something like this. The time for curing and buffing and sanding and all that would be a lot. If you got an order for a lot of these, you want to be able to get them out right away. And I think if you do the mask with the paint, that's going to be relatively quick. Obviously, the laser will be instantaneous because you won't have to wait for anything to dry. It'll just be done. But one of the problems I see with a laser, a lot of times it's not real black, it's kind of grayish. So you'd have to play with your settings to get that right. But I mean, you could certainly experiment with some different things because the laser reacts differently to various woods. So
this is why I love doing this, because your perspective, we have such a different perspective here. I have this big grandiose vision of everything of what I want to do with absolutely no consideration to how long it's going to take and all that. And you're kind of the voice of, it sounds like the voice of doom at first, but it's really the voice of reason. Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not trying to, poop on your idea at all. I think it's a great idea. I'm just trying to think I'm looking at everything from a production standpoint.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you produce these in volume? Now, obviously, if somebody's contracting you to make one of these and it's going to be a one-off custom, you can gold leaf it. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? If somebody's willing to do it.
Gold leaf.
Yeah, you could do that. But if you're going to do this in something where you're going to have like a store online and somebody's going to click add to cart and then give you the information from their pet, then now you got to look at, do you really want to go through all that extra work?
Right.
Or is somebody going to pay you for all that extra work? I don't know what you're thinking about for a price on this, but let's just say this was $100, and it's going to take you a total of 2 hours to do. Okay, that's $50 an hour. Very little material costs. You could probably say, okay, that's a pretty good business model. But if you're going to do epoxy pouring and sanding and finishing and polishing and fitting and build the sides for the box, and you got to wait for the glue to dry, and now you're talking about something that could take from the day you start it to the day you finish it, could be several days of your time. And now you're looking at that same $100, you're making $5 an hour. It's not worth it. Or will somebody pay $400?
Right, exactly.
Now, if they're gonna pay $400, okay, well then maybe it's worth going through that trouble and taking the time. But if they're not, so you have to look at what market you're going after, and you have to look at, what do you think people would be willing to pay? What level of customization can you add without it taking tons of time? And, because as it is, you've got 2 machining operations, 3 actually. You have the initial cutting of your back plate. And then if you decide you want to engrave your letters and use the ore mask and paint them, then you have to take this piece off, sand it, finish it, clear it again, probably clear it one more time. Now, if you use something like spray shellac, it dries really fast. So you could probably put 3 coats of shellac on inside of an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. and then you're done. You're in good enough shape to actually go ahead and put the mask on it. If you use like a polyurethane, now you might have to let it cure overnight before it's dry enough to put the ore mask on. So you got to look at that too with your clear. But so that's step one.
But that operation I can get that down and do 100 of those ahead of time.
Correct.
Without any of the customization stuff, without any of the finishing, the letters. So that could be done.
You could do them in bulk.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you could have them, you could even put the aura mask on. So they're all prepped and masked.
And then the second machining operation would be the letters.
Correct. The engraved letters.
The engraving, the fonts. The Lithophanes can be a completely separate operation.
That would be a third operation. Yeah. And then you got to decide, again, you got to go back to how am I going to light up the lithophane? What's your plan for that? Because if this was a plaque just hanging on the wall and you didn't have a light behind it, it doesn't look like anything. Nobody would appreciate it. So you've got to really think about that. But you are looking at three machining operations for sure. Lithophane, you're going to want to probably tape down. I don't know that I would use a vacuum table because when you're doing a lithophane, the smaller the diameter ball nose you're using, the more detail you're going to get in your finished photograph.
Yep, and right now I have it set for a 16th.
That's probably going to be too big. My guess is in order to get the detail you want on a finished product, you'll have to experiment with it, but my guess is you're going to probably need to be at a 30-second ball nose.
Really?
Yeah. To get the photo detail. I mean, you could try it at a 16th, but I don't think you're going to get, because it's not. That oval right there is, click on the oval. What are you looking at? 6 inches wide by 4 inches tall, give or take. So you've got an awful lot of detail in that photograph in a 4x6 area. So you could try it. Obviously, if you can get away with the quality you want out of a 16th ball nose, it's going to save you half the time.
I don't think the preview on Vectric gives you the detail in whether
not based on the
right.
No.
Because I tried an 1/8 inch and it looked just the same as a 16th, and that didn't make much sense to me.
So that's the first thing you're going to want to test out is grab a piece of lithophane and process on one piece of lithophane you could probably get 2 of them. Do one at a 16th and one at a 32nd. You could use like a Amana tapered 32nd inch ball nose. So if you go 32nd, it's going to take twice as long to carve. Not a big deal because it's not like you got to stand there. It can be doing, you can be doing a bunch of stuff, but there is time. And because of the small ball nose, that's what I was getting at. You may not want to have your vacuum table or your vacuum cleaner on holding this material down for 2 hours.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stay away from that.
So you're going to probably double side tape the candle stone down. There's no reason why that wouldn't work, or the blue painter's tape and super glue method. You do one of those. You could clamp it too, but you're going to need a spoil board or something underneath because you're going to eventually cut that out, the oval out. So you're going to cut through the material. So you don't want to cut into the bed. So you have to have some sort of a spoil board underneath it. So that's step one. Your initial cutting of your backing plate with the oval and the slots for the collar, you could probably hold down with double side tape as well. You could clamp it if you're using a bigger piece of material. You might be able to use vacuum depending on the material you choose. If it's oak, you won't be able to use vacuum. You won't get enough suction. There's really no reason to use a vacuum fixture. You could design one for sure, to cut these out. I could easily design one. You just have to put a cord around the rectangles and the ovals so that when the oval and the rectangles are cut out, you don't lose vacuum. So you have to quarantine those areas. But if you're going to do high quantity, yeah, I would probably look at making a vacuum fixture as opposed to double side tape. Now, when you go and you make a bunch of these blanks and then you put it on to do the engraving, then you could use vacuum. You could use a spoil board, high flow vacuum. You could make a vacuum fixture. It's just a square. It's not just something to hold it in place. So you drop them in. You're going to probably go with a XY0 datum in the middle, I would think. So you have to pick up your XY0 so your text is centered when you put this back on to your oval. So there's a few things to consider. but it's a 3-step process at best. It's 3-step. Unless you go with a laser, then you can make it a 2-step process, but you just have to have an attachment change. So you'd cut your oval, cut your slots, cut your bevel around the edge, make the backboard look really nice, and then switch to laser, and go ahead and laser the words. Or if you wanted to V-carve, you could switch to that, and then switch to laser and darken in the V-carve. You can go that route without having to remove that material from the machine. So I would consider that one operation, because you're leaving the material clamped in place.
I'm wondering why I couldn't do the 2 rectangle cutouts for the collar holder, do the circular cutout for the lithophane, but then during that same operation do the engraving there. If you do everything ahead of time, so shellac ahead of time, then put the Oramass down and then do it right there, so you don't have to do another fixture operation. Yeah,
no, actually you could do that too. You could make your square blanks, stain them all, clear them all. Put the Oramass on. Yeah, you could do that.
That way we don't have to move it, because that's going to be the tough part, is getting it up, getting it back down to the center of it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I wasn't, there was a reason why I was thinking to do it that way, but I don't remember. So yeah, you could certainly do it that way. You can, that's what it was. When you cut the oval out and you cut the slots out, you're going to have exposed wood on the edges. So my thought was that you would cut those out, and then when you stain and clear it, you would stain and clear the edges that you cut as well. And then later all you're doing is doing the engraving. So, because like if you stain the entire thing and clear it and then cut the oval and then cut the squares, the inside of the oval and the squares will be back to bare wood. How do you get the same level of finish on those edges as you did on the surface? Because it would have been done in 2 stages, right? So that's all. That's why I was thinking that, because you're going to cut those out and you've got to finish it. Yeah. So that's why I would have done it. But again, if you're gonna plan for quantity, then you make a bunch of blanks, do them, and then you just pop them on when it's time to engrave them.
Yeah. And then the customization comes afterward.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world. You can certainly do it that way, but I mean, you could try to stain the slots and the cutout later, I guess, and then somehow try to hit it with clear and have it all blend together and match, but it's gonna...
Depending on if the Lithophane's gonna pop in there, maybe I don't even need to do the inside. We'll have to do the collar, because that will show the collar holes, but the Lithophane may not, depending on how we seat that.
It depends on how you're going to attach it.
Right, exactly.
And again, that depends on how you're going to light it. So if you're going to use an LED, you're going to have to somehow get that lithophane. You need some depth behind the lithophane to get the LED in there.
Yeah, and I have no problem setting that. I kind of liked how it was sunken down, but to set it up and forward would save me having to do anything on the inside there, and also give me the option for the LED. So I think that's the way. I think that's what we're going to go. It'll be almost like a raised lithophane instead of a sunken down one.
Right. Now, another thing you could do is, if you go that route, then you could stain and mask it, right? But on the slots for the dog collar, you could make the slot, say, a 1/4 inch slot, but then run a V-bit on there, the same V-bit you're using for the dog's name. Mm-hmm. You can run a V-bit around it, so it's got a bevel on it. And then, since the whole thing will be masked, where that V-bit is will also have been masked off. So you could literally paint the 2 dog collar slots the same color as you're painting the letters up above.
Yeah, give it a little bit of pop.
Then you don't have to worry about the staining or clearing the inside of the slots. So if you were going to make it so that the lithophane was sitting in front of the plaque, then you don't need to worry about that oval hole either. So you could get this to a 2-stage process if you want to make a slot for the dog collar and then paint it.
Yeah, I think that's the route I'm going to have to go, at least to start. If that doesn't work out, then I can always adjust from there. But I can't do a third staging, because just to get that lined up is going to be more trouble than it's worth.
Right. Now, another thing to consider is, if you did want to go the let's hang this in a window route, you won't need an LED because you're going to use sunlight, but you would need to put a piece of acrylic on on the back side. Well, no, I guess you don't have to do acrylic. You could just leave the candle stone with an opening in the back. The only reason I suggested an acrylic before was if you made it so that it had an LED and could use light coming through, then you would use the acrylic to hold the LED, but it also let light through if you put it in the window. So that's why I was thinking that. So because if you did it that way, you'd have to do it double-sided because you'd have to put a rabbit around or a dado around the back. But yeah, if you just leave it open, you don't have to do that.
I'm curious what people would think if we could let us know what you guys think about that, whether it'd be a good idea to go with the LED or just do a basic window hanging where the sunlight would shine in there and kind of get that natural. I really like that idea of the sun kind of making it pop so it's not always there. But if you had to purchase this, what would you prefer? What would you buy?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just trying to think of other materials you could use too. You could use Max Metal. Or some sort of like Johnson Plastics where you've got...
Or the back?
Yeah, it would be like Max Metal, the brass is really nice. But when you carve through the brass, it's black automatically because the plastic's black. So that would save you, it would give you a brass looking or a brushed aluminum, or they even have mirror. There's a bunch of different ones that you could do on the front. And then when you V-carve into it, it's automatically colored because the plastic is black underneath it. So it would save you a finishing step. But it would, or maybe it's just something you have as an option. Like you can mix it up and have a metal looking sign. You know, the brass and the brushed aluminum are nice looking, depending on what you're looking for, I guess.
Yeah, I was thinking more of a kind of a natural, wood has some life to it, that kind of feel, but I don't hate the idea of a nice, clean, because I love the way that stuff cuts. I mean, it's just so perfect and clean. It has a little bit less life to it, but it's a lot neater. It's a lot cleaner.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, and again, not to, the whole point of this was to critique each other's projects, although you guys didn't have anything to offer on mine. But I think just whenever I look at something like this, I'm looking at it from sellability. What are you looking to make on it? What do you think it's going to cost? How much time is it going to take? And, is it something that you're going to do in high or low volume? So you have to keep all those things in mind whenever you're developing any product to see if it makes sense. I mean, I know people that, I've gone to craft fairs before, and, you walk in, you talk to somebody, you got this really cool, like, whatever that they made. And I ask, well, how'd you do, at the fair?
You mentioned your mom last week.
Yeah. It's like, I made, a few $100s, and well, that's great. But then it took you, 10 hours to make that thing. So what did you make? $1 an hour.
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, a lot of people do things for the love of it, but, I think the purpose of this exercise was not to buy the machine to make something and make no money on it. It was more, we're looking at profitability, like a business. How do I pay for my machine? Well, if you're making $1 an hour, you could pay for the machine. It'd just take you an awful long time.
And that's such an important perspective to keep in mind, because like when I was doing this, I mean, it's very hard not to get lost in this and be like, this would be so cool to do, and she would love this. But to keep that perspective in mind of, how long is it going to take just to add the shadow box on there?
Right.
Is it going to be worth it? That perspective is absolutely key. I mean, I get lost in these all the time. A
business that doesn't make any money is a hobby. So if you have to really just determine, are you in a hobby or in a business? What do you want? I mean, there's nothing wrong with either one. It just, if you want to be in business and you're not making any money, that's a problem.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's several ways to do it. And then the other thing is determining, what do you think the cost is going to be? I mean, you could really go nuts on this and charge $400 or $500. I mean, I'm sure people will love their pets enough they would pay $1,000 for a cool memorial for the pet. You can get all kinds of crazy with, like I said, gold leaf and all kinds of other stuff. Or you're going to go after the masses, right? So where do you lie? with
Yeah,
your.
and I think I have to do a little testing first before I decide that. I mean, I think originally I had this in mind to be kind of a higher ticket, not $400 or $500, but to be maybe $100, $150, depending on the woods we use, the nice kind of finish, stuff like that. But once we kind of figure out what works best for that, I think then we start to price it, right? Then we start to get an idea there, and that I'm excited for that episode. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, material-wise, even if you use a piece of cherry, what is this, 12 inches wide?
Yes. It's a 12 by 12 right now.
Yeah, so if you want a piece of cherry, you could probably pick up a board. You may have to vary your width slightly narrower, like if you went up to Inman or something and look for wide boards. I mean, maybe you get lucky and you find a board that's 13 inches or something, but you may find that they call it a 1 by 12, but it's only 11 and a quarter inches wide.
And that's okay. There's no,
So
I mean, this doesn't have to be symmetric or anything like that. There's no, it can be a little bit more tall than it is wide.
Right.
There's a lot to play with here. So
yeah, I would. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe you're looking at, I don't know, $15 in material.
that's it, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it's more than that because you're one board foot. A 12 by 12 is one board foot. So even on the high end of wood, if you're looking at $5 or $7 a board foot, so there's that material. Candlestone, that sheet, you can get 2 ovals out of it, and that was like $9. So you're $4.50 plus the wood, and then I guess if you factor in paint or a mask, maybe another $1 or $2.
I'm surprised to hear. I was planning for a lot more than that with wood the way it is these days.
Nope. But because, if you're the only guy that's doing these in Lithophane format and people think it's cool, then you can demand whatever you want for price. So yeah, you could go $99 for one of these or something.
I hope so. I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's the coolest thing I've ever done, but
I mean, you may want to also look at other options too, like instead of a square on the top, maybe do some kind of a arch, or like an arch like the Yoda thing we have over there. It's got the arch on the top. Maybe something like that. But I think what you're going to end up doing is having to come up with a couple different designs, because what I like may not be what Bobby likes, may not be what you like. So I may not want something that's square. I may want something rounded. Bobby may like square. You may want something that's got angles on it.
And frankly, that's no big deal to change that little vector there, because I thought I was going to have to Photoshop an oval around her face here that you can see, because I wasn't sure how. But then I realized all you have to do is machine to the vector to a boundary.
Correct.
Instead of doing so, I didn't have to do, because I have no Photoshop skills. Right. And instead of working with the photo, all I have to do is draw a vector around it and machine it right to there. So that would be super. I can put an arch there. I can put anything.
Right. Yep. No, I think it's a cool project though. I think it's going to do really well. I don't have any doubt. You just gotta, you don't want to be in a situation where you get orders and it puts you in a bad mood, right? If you can't deliver, or it's so painful to make these that it's like, oh, I got to make another one. Like that's telling you
that will never last.
It'll never last. You'll get miserable with it. So then you have to, like, I follow this Jen and it's a husband and wife, Jenny and Davis, I think you're called, on Facebook or on YouTube. And they have a channel. They both have full-time jobs. They fly for the military in an airplane where they fly into storms and they do recordings of stuff like that. But then they have their business, and they specialize in charcuterie boards. And they had a video the other day. It was pretty interesting. They were building up their stock on these things. So they don't have a CNC. They're using they're hand routing. They're using a bandsaw and, using a hand router and planer. They've got all kinds of woodworking tools to make these, but they were making 116 of them at a time, and they were just blanks.
Wow.
So then they put them on the shelf, and then they have a Glowforge laser, so that when you order it, the personalization is done with the laser. So they grab a blank that's already been sanded and prepped and everything, and then they put it in the laser, and they laser it. it was pretty unique. Their business is cool. They focused on one thing, but they come up with a way of, I need to make a lot. I have to have inventory. I know that the personalization is done at the end. So make a bunch of blanks, and then all you got to do is pop it in the laser it, and then ship it. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, you're going to be in the same boat. Just got to think about the plan. But,
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to some feedback. Let me know what in that LED idea versus just the window hanger, what you would buy, what you would prefer if you did something like this.
Yeah. But again, anybody who's listening to this, just check out the YouTube version or go to thinkitmakeit.us and episode 22, and you will see the video as well for this. So you can see exactly what Greg is talking about, what he's designing. Cool idea for sure. So I guess that's it for this one. And next week, Bobby's turn. Bobby gets to sit in the hot seat and explain to us exactly.
Give us any sneak preview.
Cornhole boards?
The cornhole boards?
You'll see it next week.
Yeah,
Okay,
she's
cool.
gonna make it. I.e., I haven't even started it yet. So, no problem. But yeah, so we'll look forward to that next week. And I appreciate you coming and listening to us and watching us here. And we look forward to having you back next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Until next week.
Thank you for listening to the Think It, Make It podcast. Be sure to tune in next time for more great CNC router content.